Hey, this is Wes Bridel, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update video. This one's going to be on the banking crisis 2010 and 2011. Many people probably think the banking crisis is over, that was 2 years ago, but it is nowhere near over, and we're going to talk about some of the crazy things that have happened in the last month. All of these videos are updates to the Coming Storm video, which we put out in November 2009. If you haven't seen that, you need to go watch that. There's a link to do it for free near this video, and it will give you an idea of what's been going on. It's interesting to see now, since we made it a year ago, you'll see many of the things that I talked about in that video have come to pass already, but many of the biggest, scariest things haven't happened yet, and you still have time to prepare. So you really need to watch this, because these are things that are going to affect your life. So let me jump into it. The IMF says that a new round of bank bailouts is needed throughout the world, particularly the US, Spain, and Germany. So the International Monetary Fund is saying we need a new round of bank bailouts. They said there's no stability and there's uncertainty, and there's needed $2.2 trillion of bank bailouts. The reality is that it's not even near enough money, but the idea is they want to do a few trillion here, a few trillion there, and maybe in 10 years if things will finally be stable. That is a crazy amount of money. The banks have massive problems, and we're going to get into that a little more today. They met recently, the bankers, the central bankers, and had a Basel III Accord, which said banks need to keep 4.5% in reserve. Well, for one thing, it's ridiculous that they don't have that already. That is 20 times leverage. That's a scary number to begin with, and it's even scarier they're nowhere near that today. Matter of fact, it would be so difficult for banks to get there that I don't think they don't have to do it until 2015. And the other scary thing is, if a bank owns government paper, currency in that country, I think that, or they own loans, bonds from those countries, they don't have to have reserves for those things. That paper is not safe in most cases. And so this is horrible numbers, and yet what should be basic, they can't even do. It shows the massive instability of our banks. Meredith Whitney, who's a big banking expert, recently came out and predicted 80,000 layoffs in our banks, I think primarily Wall Street. The trading profits have disappeared in Wall Street banks, and so they're hurting, and she sees massive layoffs, and a lot of times the financial sector leads the economy. So this is someone who knows that industry better than anybody, and she says massive layoffs are coming. It's going to affect the whole country. The profits just aren't there for those banks. As far as more banks in general, 279 have gone under during this crisis, and there are now 829 on the troubled list. What's interesting is the troubled list is really growing a lot, but the number of banks being closed hasn't been growing so much recently. I think the reason for that is the FDIC is insolvent, and so they don't have the ability to step in and close banks anymore. We're going to have to bail out the FDIC. We've been talking about this for a long time, but they're at the end of their rope. Now let's talk about this foreclosure fiasco. If you've been catching the news, this is a really big deal. It might not seem like a big deal to you yet, but this is really, there's a good chance this is going to be the next big thing that takes us down. Probably the same way you first heard about collateralized mortgage obligations. You didn't think that was a big deal. It ended up taking us down big time. This is a very similar thing. It started with, I think, a GMAC robo guy. It was a guy that was supposed to be doing very official documents, looking over, doing due diligence. He admitted he was doing 10,000 a month. He was just blindly signing these foreclosures, and it's caused a kind of a nightmare situation. I think First Bank of America stopped their foreclosure process in 23 states. There's 23 states that don't have to go. Let's see, I might be flipping this, but there's, I think, 23 states that do go before a judge, and so there's a signed, sworn statement that everything they're saying is correct in order to get a foreclosure. The other 27 states, they just kind of move the paperwork through without having to swear them. Well, the First Bank of America stopped their foreclosures in those states. Then, when looking into it, they realized they have a big enough problem. They've stopped it in all states. There's a couple more banks, a couple more really big banks that have now stopped it in just those 23 states. If the foreclosure process grinds to a halt, it's going to be very, very costly to banks, which is going to be very bad for the whole economy. It also leads to a bad moral situation. If your neighbor is not paying his mortgage and he's able to stay there for years and you're paying yours, it's going to irk you. There's going to be many people that decide not to pay their mortgage. The whole system is going to be in very dire straits. And so this is something to pay attention to. These things are happening. It's just begun. All 50 states are now investigating. This news came out today. I'm doing this video on the 13th. And all 50 states are now investigating this. It's going to get ugly. And somebody, it's maybe been Chris Whalen, I can't remember, said that we're less than 1/4 of the way through this crisis, and that costs are rising dramatically due to foreclosure and default. And basically, the banks are going to be nationalized. This is crazy because this seems like Soviet Russia that we're talking about, but there's really, they should have let them fold, and they should just let them fold, but what they're going to do most probably is nationalize all of them, make our country more and more socialist, communist, whatever. The problem is government-run economies flounder, and that's where we are. Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't seen the Coming Storm video, please take the time to go and watch that. It is free. It's really important for you and your family. If you have any questions, holler out to me, Wes at kingdomcalling.com. Thank you, and God bless you.